Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Spaceflight Now's latest coverage of this mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. A Falcon 9 rocket getting ready to lift off from Space Launch Complex 40 with 28 Starlink satellites in tow. I'm Will Robinson Smith, reporter with Spaceflight Now. So good to have you with us here on this Sunday, October 26th, just a few days before Halloween. Certainly appreciate your time and attention joining us. See, we've got about 500 of you in our live stream as we're kicking things off. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking the like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage as we roll on through the count. We're broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. It's a bit of a blustery day as we're getting things rolling, and we'll be talking about the weather as we progress through the count. Currently, SpaceX is just under 59 minutes away from the planned liftoff of the Starlink 10-21 mission. Our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, is running the technical operations of our broadcast today. Photographers Adam Bernstein and John Pisani out and about making sure all the cameras are framed up nicely in focus and ready to track, assuming SpaceX has good enough weather for the launch coming up here in just about 58 minutes now. Be sure to follow all of our photographers at their handles you see here on X. Adam is at AburnNYC, John Pisani at John Pisani Photo, Michael Kane at MD Kane Jr. Also be sure to follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. You can find us on X, Threads, Blue Sky, and Facebook. We will also be joined a little bit later in the broadcast by our friends Pete Karstens with Max Q Productions and Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. As I mentioned at the start of the show, wind is one of the potential watch items today, as you can tell by looking out towards pad 39A here in this shot, and we'll punch in a little closer to the American flag and get a sense of how gusty it is here on Florida's Space Coast, up and down this 72-mile long county. The part we care about, though, for the relevance of this mission, of course, is Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. So let's go ahead and take an eagle eye view from the GOES East satellite position. Taking a second to troubleshoot something. We'll bring that satellite loop up in just a moment here. But as far as the 45th Weather Squadron is concerned, meteorologists did forecast a 85% chance for favorable weather during the start of the launch window. That decreases down to 70% as the window progresses. Meteorologists mostly pointing towards the impacts of cumulus clouds. However, if SpaceX is unable to launch today, the weather outlook does drop a bit from 85% at the start of the window down to 80%, and the back end of Monday window would be about 60% favorability for liftoff. And apologies, we are not going to be able to bring in that satellite data that I was just referencing. Apparently, there's an issue refreshing from the public-facing data coming from that satellite. So if that does update later on, we'll bring that in to the broadcast. And we do have a new T0 of 11:40 a.m. Eastern. Six. Correction, 11 a.m. and 40 seconds, not 11:40 a.m. So we're pushing back the T0 time. You can see that on the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Currently T minus 1 hour, 14 minutes, 19 seconds. Thanks for bearing with us, folks. Just getting things updated. Again, SpaceX has pushed back the T0 liftoff time for this mission, now targeting the top of the hour at 11 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC for our friends around the world. With a little more time on the clock, want to take a quick look at our live chat here. I want to thank Rick Donner for holding it down as our moderator this morning. If you do see any of the other mods cruise on in throughout the course of the broadcast, be sure to give them a big old spaceflight now. Hello. I also want to thank one of our channel members, Cumulus Granatus, for helping to answer folks' questions in the chat. Going back to the moderators for a second, you can help their job by just following the rules of the live chat. We ask that you post your message in English so that the mods can respond as appropriate. Also, that you hold off from delving into overt politics and religion and don't use all caps. Emojis are perfectly fine. We just ask that you don't create a huge block of them so it takes up a large percentage of the live chat space so other people can see their messages and be digitally heard as well. Last but not least, we ask that you treat each other with the kindness and respect that you yourself would like to be treated. This and every other live launch broadcast is made possible in no small part thanks to our wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. Thanks to folks like Scad267, the Rocket Girl. Let's see what else we have this morning. Got Kari with us today. Space Coast Rocket Launches is in the house. Sulfur for Lunch and many, many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, which is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, access to our members-only Discord server community, and of course, the ability to watch all of our live launch liftoff moments from here in Florida in 4K. Also want to thank one of our channel members, Daniel H., for gifting 2 Spaceflight Now memberships now. Appreciate the generosity, Daniel. Thanks for helping to grow our community here on YouTube. And to our newest gifted members, welcome to you. Glad to have you with us. Be sure to thank Daniel in the live chat if you haven't already, and we hope you decide to stick around with channel membership beyond the month you were just gifted. Last little bit of housekeeping here. If you have a comment or question about this mission or other goings on in the realm of space or spaceflight, or would just like to support what we're doing here at Spaceflight Now, you can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will it be giving us some interesting things to talk about as we cruise on through the count, but you'll also be supporting our coverage of the space program, both commercial and government. And that, my friends, is always greatly appreciated. Given the potential trickiness with the weather, we may see some additional shifts in the T0. We will make those as readily apparent as they become available to us. SpaceX, once they've started fueling their Falcon 9 rocket, has no ability to hold its countdown, so it will continue to make assessments up to the point at which it needs to make the call on the start of fueling, or before then, if it feels like it has enough data to suggest that the next available T0 is not an optimal option for them. They will continue to shift things in the launch window if necessary. The 28 Starlink satellites on board this Falcon 9 rocket, though, once it is able to depart the pad at Space Launch Complex 40, set to deploy into low Earth orbit about just a hair over an hour after a liftoff. Today's mission will be the 136th flight of a Falcon 9 rocket so far in 2025. If you weren't with us for our coverage yesterday, this is SpaceX's latest chapter as they continue to break the calendar year launch record that they set in 2024. Time now, T minus 1 hour, 3 minutes, 24 seconds and counting. Congratulations to JAXA for a good launch of their H3 rocket at 8 p.m. last night Eastern, midnight UTC, sending the first HTVX spacecraft on its way to the International Space Station. That cargo vehicle is set to be captured and berthed to the nadir, or Earth-facing port of the Harmony module. It's coming up on October 29th. The vehicle is set to be captured by JAXA astronaut Kimiya Yui, alongside support from NASA astronaut Zena Cardman, two members of the Crew 11 mission. It's a great moment upcoming for Kimiya Yui, since not only was he the first Japanese astronaut to capture the previous cargo vehicle from Japan, the HTV, but he also helped in the development of the HTVX spacecraft as well, not knowing that he would be on orbit at the time that it was going to be coming up for berthing to the space station. Coming up once again on T minus 1 hour ahead of the current T0 time of 11 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC. We will, of course, continue to watch for any further changes to the launch time today. Taking a look at our live chat as we're just now hitting T minus 1 hour in about 3 seconds. Leslie in the chat asking about any upcoming crewed missions that may still be on the launch calendar in 2025. There is one more currently planned. That is the Soyuz MS-28 mission, which will take cosmonauts, and I'm going to apologize to any of our Russian-speaking audience for my pronunciation of these names. Sergei Sverchkov, who is the commander of the mission, and Sergei Mikhaev, one of the flight engineers on board. Also joining them is NASA astronaut Christopher Williams, the second member of the NASA astronaut class known as the Flies, who will be flying up to space for their first mission. One of the backup crew members for the MS-28 mission, meaning that they are training for likely a future Soyuz flight, not necessarily the next one, but probably the one after that, is Anil Menon, former SpaceX employee turned NASA astronaut. For those who were following the latest astronaut class announcement, Anna Menon of formerly a SpaceX employee as well as a crew member on Polaris Dawn, was also named as part of the newest astronaut class. And Neil's class, the Flies, will have the distinction, as has been the case with previous astronaut classes, of naming this new batch of astronaut candidates. Time now currently T minus 55 minutes, 15 seconds and counting. Again, we're closely watching for any further updates to the T0 time, but as we're ticking closer and now within 20 minutes of when the SpaceX launch director will make the call and start of prop load, let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline, the series of events that we're going to be watching for as SpaceX prepares to launch its Falcon 9 rocket from Slick 40 this morning. Once the launch director makes the call on prop load, fueling of the Falcon 9 rocket will begin at the T minus 35-minute mark with the loading of RP1, a rocket-grade kerosene on board the rocket's first and second stages, liquid oxygen flowing on board the rocket's booster as well. Half an hour before liftoff, SpaceX will start to load a cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels for the Falcon 9's first stage. Same is true on the second stage a few minutes after that. The helium will be used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. At T minus 23 minutes is when the second stage RP1 tank is full. And at T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds is when the strong back chill down process begins. SpaceX at this point in the countdown is thermally conditioning the feed lines at the pad prior to second stage LOX load getting underway. We see this manifest visually as the big vent beginning at about T minus 20 minutes and 20 seconds. The LOX then starts flowing at the 16-minute mark. Speaking of liquid oxygen, at T minus 7 minutes, SpaceX will flow a small amount of LOX through the plumbing and turbo pumps for the Falcon 9's 9 Merlin engines at the base of the booster. That helps to protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during startup. 6 minutes before flight, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the strong back retract process begin. The clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings will open up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position until liftoff. Then at that point, it'll pull back in a more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. 3 minutes before departure, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. Same is true on the second stage, about a minute after that, at which point the Falcon 9 rocket is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, as we hear the call that the Falcon 9 is in its automated startup, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers, and the propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will then give their go for launch call at T minus 45 seconds. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds, and if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite as expected, the command will be given for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 rocket for a T0 liftoff. Once again, currently targeting 11 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC, just shy of 52 minutes from now. Time now, T minus 50 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Today's mission, Starlink 10-21, will in fact present a bit of an adjustment to our list of the Falcon 9 frequent flyers, the most flown boosters from SpaceX that we track here on the broadcast. Here's where things currently stand with the list of SpaceX's most flown boosters. Second from the bottom, B-1077 is got its name called up for today. It'll be flying its 24th mission to space and back, bumping off B-1078 from the list for now. Here's a look at the bar chart as of yesterday's launch. As we noted during that broadcast, but if you were not there then, SpaceX has officially surpassed the record number of launches it achieved in all of 2024, currently sitting at 135, and 136 is at the pad as we speak. Time now T minus 46 minutes, 46 seconds and counting. Want to go back to the question in the chat asking about any crewed flights coming up with the remainder of the year. I mentioned the MS-28 mission and was remiss in not mentioning the Shenzhou 21 flight on a Long March 2F rocket that will send three taikonauts up to the Tiangong space station. Speaking of our chat, want to welcome in a new channel member, Mark Clemens, joining us with membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Mark. We're glad to have you with us. Time now T minus 43 minutes and counting. We'll show this early in the broadcast and again as we get a little bit closer to liftoff, but want to talk about the trajectory for today's mission, give y'all an idea of where this rocket's going to be heading. Following liftoff from Space Launch Complex 40 there at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, the Falcon 9 rocket will fly on a northeasterly trajectory heading along the coast of the eastern U.S. Following stage separation, a little bit past the 2.5 minute mark in the mission, first stage booster B-1077 will target a touchdown on the drone ship called a short fall of gravitas. If all goes well with this booster recovery, this would be the 130th good landing on this particular vessel and the 524th booster recovery for SpaceX to date. Of course, SpaceX is also interested in retrieving the payload fairings at the top of the rocket. Following atmospheric reentry, they splashed down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. Once down safely in the water, they'll be brought aboard a SpaceX recovery vessel, then make their way to Port Canaveral, where they will be offloaded, brought over to the Hangar X site here at the Kennedy Space Center, refurbished, and turned around for future missions. As we're now just past T-minus 41 minutes, we're coming up to the point at which the SpaceX launch director is going to need to make the call on whether or not they are ready to proceed with prop load for today's mission. If the go-ahead for fueling is given, tanking will start it in about 5 minutes. Of course, SpaceX, as we expect, will not be broadcasting the start of the fueling process and the announcement that they have given the go-ahead to start tanking their rockets. So we will rely on some visual cues for the start of fueling. We're looking for the frost line to form near the base of the rocket as the super cold, densified liquid oxygen begins to flow on board the rocket's first stage. T-minus 38 minutes and counting. Again, this is the nominal point at which SpaceX makes the call on the start of prop load. We're now T minus 35 minutes and counting. At this point, SpaceX should be fueling its Falcon 9 rocket, just getting that process started there at Space Launch Complex 40. In the next few minutes, we should see some evidence of fueling for the Falcon 9 rocket, though it's going to be a bit tricky to discern just given the amount of wind at the pad and, well, here at the press side as well, bouncing our cameras. If you look at the box on the right hand or the right side of your screen, just above the tree line is where we should start to see the frost line form as that super cold densified liquid oxygen begins to flow on board the rocket's first stage. Again, apologies for the camera shake, but there's unfortunately not a whole lot that we can do about that. We've got the cameras weighed down as best we can. Time now T minus 30 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Again, conditions are making it quite difficult to see the frost line that should be forming at this point in the countdown. Though it's worth noting the countdown clock on SpaceX's website continues to tick down as well. So that would suggest things are progressing as anticipated with this mission. And if that is in fact the case, SpaceX is about 5 minutes into the fueling process. Time now T minus 28 minutes and counting. It's a little bit easier to see in this vantage point from our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images. If you look near the base of the rocket, you can see a little bit of a lighter area where the strong back starts to taper in. That's starting to form. That's the frost line that I was mentioning earlier. This lends further credence to our belief that SpaceX is in fact fueling its Falcon 9 rocket and is on track for a liftoff attempt at 11 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC. Time now T minus 23 minutes, 29 seconds and counting. Before we go ahead and see the start of the big vent with SpaceX preparing to load liquid oxygen on board the rocket's upper stage, let's go ahead and talk about the booster history for this particular Falcon 9 first stage, tail number B1077 in the SpaceX fleet. It began flying back on October 5th of 2022 in support of the Crew 5 mission up to the International Space Station. That called upon Dragon Endurance. This mission notable because it featured the first launch of a Roscosmos cosmonaut flying on board a Dragon spacecraft to the ISS. Since then, for all of the commercial crew program missions to the space station, there has been one cosmonaut on board as part of the seat swap agreement between NASA and Roscosmos. That was followed up by the launch of a GPS-3 space vehicle number 6 on January 18th of 2023. Inmarsat 6F2 was up next a month later in February, followed by this booster's first Starlink mission, Starlink 5-10, on March 29th. Another Dragon flight to the space station, this time a cargo vehicle, launching on the CRS, or Commercial Resupply Services 28 mission, kicking off the summer for this booster, followed up by the Galaxy 37 flight on August 3rd on behalf of Intelsat at the time. Trio of Starlinks followed that. We had Starlink 6-13 on September 1st, 6-25 on October 30th, and 6-33 on December 7th. That was followed up by the launch of a Cygnus spacecraft from Northrop Grumman on the NG-20 mission, another cargo run to the space station on January 30th of last year. A run of Starlinks followed that. We had Starlink 6-43 on March 10th, 6-51 on April 17th, 6-63 on May 24th, and 10-4 on July 28th, as well as 8-11 on September 5th. The Optus X, otherwise referred to as the TD-7 mission, launched on November 17th of 2024, bringing us into this year where we had a series of, jump the gun there, a series of Starlink missions that launched, bringing us into today, where in just about 10 seconds we should see the big vent for this current flight. Big vent is underway there at the pad. This is a roughly 4-minute long vent as, again, SpaceX prepares to load liquid oxygen aboard the rocket's upper stage. just about a minute remaining left on this big vent. Things continue to progress well towards a T0 liftoff at 11 a.m. Eastern, 1500 UTC. Taking a look back at our live chat, I want to thank the more than 2,200 of you who are watching along with us live this morning. If you haven't already, you could do us a big favor just by clicking that like button and sharing the stream, allowing some more folks to find their way into this live launch coverage. Want to thank Queen of Star Wars for a $10 super chat, who says, thanks for always having great coverage. Love the handle name, by the way. Big Vent has wrapped up. Lock Load is set to begin for the second stage now in about 15 seconds. Also want to thank channel member Chuck Close for a very generous $25 super chat. Thank you, Chuck. Good to see you this morning. Appreciate the support. And thanks as well to K2 Hat for a $5 super chat, who says, good morning from Mico, Florida. Thanks for the great coverage. Thanks as always for the support, K2. Time now T minus 15 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. While we won't see deployment of the 28 Starlink satellites on board this Falcon 9 rocket today, here's a video from a previous deployment to give you a sense of what this will look like. SpaceX releases the full stack of Starlink satellites as one collective, and then they slowly float apart and do their orbital raising to their operating positions in low Earth orbit. You can see near the end of this loop, right about here, the pins that were holding the Starlink satellites together slowly fold back in towards the body of the Falcon 9's second stage after they've released the Starlink satellites. And again, they drift off together as one collective and then slowly drift apart to their correct orbital positions. It was a week ago today that SpaceX launched its 10,000th Starlink satellite to date. According to stats maintained by astronomer, expert orbital tracker, and friend of the channel, Jonathan McDowell, SpaceX currently has more than 8,700 Starlink satellites in low Earth orbit. And they use data from the Space Force in order to avoid satellites that are not part of the Starlink constellations and do their necessary avoidance maneuvers to prevent a collision with other objects in space. Obviously, this is quite an undertaking that SpaceX is doing continuously throughout each and every day, since they have those thousands of satellites in low Earth orbit. If you want to learn more about the Starlink constellation, their road to 10,000 and the future for the constellation, be sure to head on or stay right here on the YouTube channel and check out the video that we posted about the 10,000th Starlink satellite launched. Got some great insight from Jonathan McDowell as well as Caleb Henry, the director of research over at Quilty Space. just under 12 minutes on the clock. Want to thank channel member Virginia Pruitt for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Virginia. Appreciate the support this morning. Also, thanks to Christopher Hayes for a $10 super chat as well. Wishing a happy 30th birthday to Sarah. Happy birthday, Sarah. Time now, T-minus 11 minutes, 5 seconds and counting. Delving a little bit more into the payload on board today's Falcon 9 rocket launch. Talking a little bit more about the payload on board today's mission, 28 Starlink V2 Mini optimized satellites. This is the 97th Starlink launch of the year so far, with these optimized version of the satellites weighing considerably less than their predecessors. Once the solar panels have been unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall effect thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. These satellites were built up in Redmond, Washington, and they'll be deployed at about 172 miles or 277 kilometers in altitude at a 53-degree inclination. 9.5 minutes remaining on the clock today. Coming up here in 2.5 minutes is the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines at the base of the Falcon booster. As we're just about 8 minutes away from this Falcon 9 rocket launch. As a reminder, there is another Falcon 9 flight scheduled to depart tomorrow, that being a launch from California. Looking at the departure of the Starlink 11-21 mission, set to lift off at about 4:34 p.m. Pacific, 7:34 p.m. Eastern, 23:34 UTC. And then it's back here to Florida for a launch on the 28th at about 9:14 a.m. Eastern as things currently stand. Just under 7 minutes now. The engine chill sequence should be getting underway. We'll have pad level views the Falcon 9 rocket with hopefully a little bit less shake from the wind coming up here in under 2 minutes. Want to thank Monkey Tree Rob for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Rob. Good to see you. It's been a minute. Rob says, "Hey, Will and Space People, this morning, hanging on a choppy slash windy day here in O Town on Lake Fairview with a few mimosas. Let's light this rocket up. Been a while on here. Thanks for all you do." Well, that sounds like a perfect way to start a Sunday morning, even if it is a little blustery. Nice mimosa in hand, and hopefully a good flight of a Falcon 9 rocket in the sky is a nice way to start off back half of the weekend. 6 minutes on the clock at this point. The first stage RB1 tank should be full. Also should go without saying, but since it's been brought up, for those who are of legal drinking age, please drink responsibly and always remember to never drink and drive.
Falcon 9 tanks are pressurizing for strong back retract.
And as you just heard and can now see, we've got pad level views of the Falcon 9 rocket and mission audio courtesy of SpaceX.
Strong back retract has started.
With that call, we'll shortly be seeing the clamp arms just beneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, otherwise referred to as the strong back, will recline a few degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket and stay in that position up to and through, or up to liftoff, before pulling back in a much more rapid fashion. You can see those clamp arms have now opened up around the fairing, which looks pretty shiny and white. Might be a new, at least this half of the payload fairing, might be a new one for SpaceX on this mission. Of course, the company is working to certify its fairing halves as well as the boosters for up to 40 flights apiece, but that doesn't mean that they don't also need to introduce new fairings and new boosters every now and again.
Stage 1, LOX load complete.
Good call on first stage LOX load. We should be hearing a similar call regarding the rocket's upper stage at about the T-minus 2 minute mark. Referring back to our Sunday beverage of choice conversation, K2 Hat with another $2 super chat saying, "I prefer coffee." Thanks for the reminder, Mr. Will. Also want to thank Florida Gal and WGLG for each making a $10 super chat.
Stage 2, LOX load complete.
Thank you both so much for your support. And with that call you just heard, the Falcon 9 rocket is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. Momentarily, we'll be seeing some additional venting for the ground gas closeouts.
Ground gas closeouts.
In just about 15 seconds, the Falcon 9 rocket will enter into its automated startup. T-minus 1 minute and counting.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call, we're just awaiting the SpaceX launch director to make the confirmation that they are in fact go for launch.
Go for launch.
And with that good go for launch call, we are now coming up on 30 seconds to go before departure of this Falcon 9 rocket on the 136th flight of a Falcon 9 this year.
T-minus 30 seconds.
20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 10-21 mission. Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Nice view of the Falcon 9 as we're
Falcon 9 is supersonic.
approaching max Q, point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle.
Max Q.
There's that call. Next up will be the thermal conditioning of the Merlin vacuum engine on the rocket's upper stage before the start of its first burn. A little more than a minute and a half into flight.
MVAC chill has started.
We're coming up on a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff, or MECO. That's coming up at about T plus 2 minutes and 25 seconds. That'll be followed shortly thereafter by stage separation and the ignition of that Merlin vacuum engine. And then the payload fairings will be jettisoned before 3 minutes into this flight. Here's the MECO. Should have stage separation.
Main engine cut off.
Stage separation confirmed.
MVAC startup.
All good calls, good visuals. Those grid fins deploying. Payload jettison is next.
Fairing separation confirmed.
And a nice view of the 28 Starlink V2 mini satellites on board. SpaceX will be attempting to recover those payload fairing halves once they
Stages are on nominal trajectories.
splash down in the waters of the Atlantic Ocean under the support of steerable parachutes. We're now about 3.5 minutes into the mission so far. Coming up next, the next big milestone is going to be the 3-engine entry burn, set to slow the first stage down quite dramatically. It's scheduled to start per SpaceX at about T plus 6 minutes and 6 seconds and will last less than 30 seconds in duration. Some nice views beyond the Kármán line there from both the first and second stages. Looks like the Falcon booster has just about reached its apogee today, topping out at about 114 kilometers in altitude. Now making its descent towards the drone ship, called a short fall of gravitas. For those who were not with us earlier in the broadcast, this will be the 130th good landing on that drone ship if all goes well, and the 524th booster landing for SpaceX to date. Coming up on 5 minutes into flight, a little more than a minute remaining before the start of the entry burn.
Stage 1 FTS is saved.
Stage 1 entry burn startup. Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
As a reminder, before or after the booster lands on the drone ship, we'll have our wrap up of current launch stats for this mission in the context of space flight around the world, as well as our launch replays showing all the various angles that we were able to capture this launch. Especially good to see some of the angles that we aren't necessarily able to show in their full robustness in the midst of the live launch coverage itself that you just saw. So stick around for that before you go ahead and enjoy the rest of your Sunday. We're now about 7.5 minutes
Transonic.
into this mission. The booster now traveling below the speed of sound, coming up to the start of the landing burn, set to begin in less than 30 seconds.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Stage 2 terminal guidance.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 1 landing confirmed.
And that marks a good landing of B-1077, concluding its 24th trip to space and back.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
Nominal parking orbit.
And with good confirmations of both the wrap up of that engine burn and a nominal parking orbit, the upper stage will now coast until about T plus 50 minutes and 59 seconds, with a brief 1-second burn to circularize its orbit. It sets the stage for the Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour and 21 minutes into this flight. With a good liftoff and landing of that first stage booster, that marked flight number 24 for B-1077. That was SpaceX's 553rd Falcon 9 launch to date. As we go through these stats, as a reminder, we're getting those launch replays ready for you, so don't go too far. This was SpaceX's 136th Falcon 9 launch of the year so far. The 488th Falcon booster reflight, the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was the company's 168th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 287th orbital launch from Pad 40, and the 342nd overall orbital launch for SpaceX from this pad as well. Here's an updated look at the bar chart, now showing a couple missions ahead of the record year that SpaceX had in 2024. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 130th good landing on the drone ship called a shortfall of gravitas. That marked SpaceX's 428th good drone ship landing. As well as the 524th overall SpaceX booster landing to date. Finally, with some mission stats for the space industry, this was the 89th orbital launch from Florida. Just to check in where we stand for Florida records, there were a total number of 93 orbital launches from the Sunshine State last year. So between the Kennedy Space Center and Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, Florida is set to handily surpass that record as we cruise on towards 100 launches from Florida. This was the 143rd orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 156th orbital launch from a U.S. rocket company, as well as the 245th orbital launch around the world. There have been 5 orbital mishaps so far this year. Here's where the pie chart now currently stands. As we finish getting those launch replays ready for you, as a reminder, we do have more launch coverage to bring to you as we kick off the work week. Starlink 11-21 coming up tomorrow at 4:34 p.m. Pacific, 23:34 UTC from Vandenberg Space Force Base in California. That'll be followed on the 28th by the Starlink 10-37 mission from here in Florida. And then we're back to the West Coast for Starlink 11-23 as things currently stand on October 30th, just before Halloween. Some other notable missions that we're tracking in the coming weeks, of course, the forthcoming launch of the second New Glenn rocket to launch to date with NASA's Escapade mission, a big Mars-bound flight for NASA, which hopefully the government shutdown will be wrapped up by then, but we'll see. Regardless, the mission is still able to move forward even if the government shutdown is still persisting. Also coming up around the corner is the launch of the next Atlas V rocket from United Launch Alliance, set to fly on Monday, November 3rd. That is in support of the Viasat-3 F2 vehicle heading out to geostationary orbit. As is the case with all of the remaining Atlas V rockets, with the exception of those supporting future flights of Boeing Starliner spacecraft. This will be in a 551 configuration, which means SpaceX is using 5 of the Northrop Grumman solid rocket motors to support this flight coming up on that Atlas V. And we've got those replays ready for you. Let's start with the press site fixed view from Adam Bernstein. On to the wide view next. Next up, the South Tracker from Pete. As you may notice in our launch replays, there were some challenging conditions given the cloud cover around Florida's Space Coast, especially from further down south where Pete was. There were quite a few clouds that were obscuring the Falcon 9 rockets, so that made his track a little bit shorter than it would typically be. Now on to the Merritt Island tracker from Chuck and Jen Briggs of C&J Images. Now on to John Pisani's wide tracker. Now on to Adam's tracker here at the press site to bring us home. As a reminder, SpaceX no longer shows deployment of its Starlink satellites live, so we will not have that as a part of our broadcast today. And that will go ahead and do it for our live coverage of the Starlink 10-21 mission. Certainly appreciate all of you for sticking it out till the very end. Thanks to moderator Rick Donner for holding it down in the live chat today for us, to channel member Cumulus Granatus for answering folks' questions in the chat as well. Oh, Mark Otto, also moderator with us today. Sorry, Mark. Before we go ahead and let you go, though, do want to share one last bit with you all. A couple of photos that were captured by our photographer, Michael Kane. Good couple of snaps showing the initial ascent of the Falcon 9 rocket as it began this mission now some 26 minutes ago. If you're not following the photography team here at Spaceflight now, you can find them at their handles here on X. Michael is at MD Kane Jr., John is at John Pisani Photo, and Adam at Aburn NYC. Also, be sure to follow Spaceflight Now on most social medias. You can find us simply at Spaceflight Now. Also, our thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. Most importantly, though, thanks to you for wherever you've been watching from today. We certainly appreciate your time and attention, and we hope you have a wonderful, safe, and relaxing rest of your Sunday. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others. We will see you next time, folks, and until then, bye-bye.